Hey, RetconRaider here. I wasn't going to bother making a review about Galaxy of Pen and Paper, but I've been playing it off and on for the past week, and I had a bit of spare time. So I figured I might as well throw together a quick little bonus video. So, what is Galaxy of Pen and Paper? Well, it's a casual role-playing game with a heavy focus on humor and procedurally generated quests. It's the third game in the Pen and Paper trilogy, a series of similarly casual games that all involve the player taking control of a group of tabletop gamers who embark on a series of increasingly absurd adventures while they poke fun at a wide assortment of gaming and entertainment media tropes. The first two games were based on loosely defined fantasy settings, parodying games such as Dungeons & Dragons. But Galaxy of Pen and Paper takes things to the stars, with the player taking control of a gaming group who are instead playing a generic science fiction RPG in a public chat room. The plot is relatively thin, with a heavy reliance on ham-fisted humor and jokey references to a wide assortment of science fiction properties to keep the player's attention. The simulated fourth wall is frequently battered or outright broken as the virtual tabletop gamers joke and comment on their adventures, or as their sessions are interrupted by family members or internet trolls who crash their chat room. The main story is told through a series of simple linear battle scenarios punctuated with occasional low-impact story decisions. The overall storyline for the game is largely predetermined, but the player can occasionally have some minor influence on how a specific scene or event plays out, such as deciding which player will respond to an event, or which direction the game master decides to move the game in. The effects of these decisions are usually very minor, slightly modifying the ensuing battle or reward, before the story settles back onto its predetermined track. But really, like I said a moment ago, this is pretty much the definition of a casual game. The story is mostly just there as an engine to deliver humor and pop culture references, as well as to give you an excuse to fight space monsters and grind XP. This is evidenced by the procedural mission system, which is bolted onto the main campaign. This system allows the player to randomly generate an assortment of simple tasks that they can perform for extra rewards. There's nothing terribly fancy here. The missions are always extraordinarily simplistic single-stage quests, such as killing a certain number of specific enemy types, escorting an NPC from one planet to another, gathering a certain number of a specific resource, and so on. They just serve as an excuse to get into more fights, so that it feels a bit less monotonous when you're out there grinding. Speaking of which, that brings us to the real focus of the game, the combat system. It's a fairly straightforward turn-based combat system, with the player controlling up to 4 adventurers at a time, and fighting up to 6 monsters at a time. The player can generally customize the battle to their likings, deciding the type and quantity of monsters they want to fight, though certain battles such as story events or the occasional random encounter will instead present the player with battles against randomized foes, or even unique bosses. The combat system is simple and intuitive, with little to really differentiate it from most generic RPG systems on the market. Each combatant is placed in an initiative tracker, taking one action as their turn comes up, until everyone has gotten a chance to act and a new round begins. There are some basic strategies that can be built around things like threat management, status conditions, tactical positioning, and area attacks, but overall the system is just simple enough that it can quickly verge on the edge of boringly repetitive. Although the player can normally control the number and type of foes they're fighting in any given battle, they're generally encouraged to fight more powerful monsters by the scaling reward system. Enemies that are too weak will offer less experience points and item drops, while fighting densely packed groups of more powerful monsters will offer significantly greater rewards. This passively encourages the player to keep seeking out greater challenges, so they can keep receiving greater rewards. And of course, all these rewards are channeled directly into building up your adventuring party, which starts off with a mere 2 adventurers, but will slowly expand to a full roster of 8 adventurers over time. Character generation is reasonably fun, but also rather simplistic. The player gets to choose from one of 8 player archetypes, one of 4 character classes, and one of 3 character races, which all combine together to create your adventurer's base appearance and character sheet. As your adventurers slaughter monsters by the screenful, You'll gain levels which come with preset attribute increases determined by your class, as well as ability points which you can allocate into a small assortment of class abilities. You'll also gather a fair amount of loot, which again mostly encompasses your usual RPG fare, but often with tongue-in-cheek names. Space pizzas and astronaut food act as your basic healing items, various drinks restore your stamina, batteries restore your shield power, and so on. You'll also find various gadgets that you can slot onto your adventurers to grant them additional passive bonuses to various attributes. But unlike the previous games, you don't get to handle things like weapon or armor management this time around. Instead, there are weaponsmiths scattered throughout the game who offer passive bonuses to your default equipment for rather steep prices that will force you to go out and grind even more. Beyond the basic combat and character system, the game also offers a fairly simplistic exploration system, allowing you to wander around the galaxy. Though there's generally not much to discover other than different types of enemies and the occasional random NPCs to chat with, and even those NPCs often just end up recycling the same dialogue. While it's fun to poke around on different planets, the enemies on each planet have a predetermined level range, and you'll quickly outgrow them until you're no longer gaining any meaningful reward from being on that particular planet. There's a mining mechanic that lets you harvest basic resources unique to each planet, but those resources are exclusively used as part of a very bare-bones trading mechanic, which, honestly, may be the most boring and grind-heavy part of the game. Similarly, there's also a space combat mechanic, but the player's spaceship is largely static. No equipment loadouts, no significant ways to improve its performance in combat. It's just presented as an RNG-heavy slugfest that limits the player's involvement to deciding when to attack, when to heal, and when to use basic combat items. And really, I think that's the biggest problem with the game. It's just too simplistic and grind-heavy, meaning that most players are likely to get bored sooner rather than later. There are some interesting ideas in the game design, but none of them are very well realized, and just about everything seems a little too limited to really provide much variety or replayability. Galaxy of Pen and Paper was designed first and foremost as a mobile game, and it really does show. It feels like the sort of casual, grind-heavy game that you'd want to play while you're in a waiting room or on break at work and just need to kill some time. It's almost the literal definition of a casual RPG. I don't even think there's a lose state, so no matter how badly you're doing, you can always just dust your defeated adventurers off and keep trying over and over again. And then there's the overall lack of quality control, which is unfortunate. Galaxy of Pen and Paper is developed by Behold Studios, who are a small studio based out of Brazil, and their limited budget does show through rather clearly. There are a lot of typos in the English version of the game, but in some ways that can be easily overlooked as part of the overarching joke about the setting of the game. After all, who expects a chat room RPG session to involve perfect spelling? But it's harder to overlook the large number of bugs that the game initially launched with. These bugs range from minor annoyances like broken scripting, swapped character sprites, or incorrect quest rewards, to more serious issues like character abilities that just don't work at all, and broken quests that would block game progress or cause your game to lock up entirely. This is something that's made even worse by the decision to use an autosave-only save system, so if something messes up your game, you can't just roll back to an earlier save to fix it. To their credit, Behold Studios is quickly trying to address problems as they're reported, and they're currently releasing a new patch every week. But it does leave a bit of a bad taste in my mouth, and it makes me wonder if they'll ever actually fix all the bugs in the game. So, what's the verdict? Well, the music and graphics are charming, if you're into that sort of retro pixel art and chiptune music style. The humor and references can also be entertaining, and it did give me the occasional chuckle, but humor is a very subjective thing, so it may be too ham-fisted or in-your-face for some folks. The concepts behind the game range from cute to modestly clever, but I don't think you're ever going to run into anything particularly memorable. The player is given some options to shape their overall experience, but these are few and far between, and the game relies very heavily on repetitive activities, such as grinding against enemies, or grinding for resources, or just grinding in general. I find it ironic that one of the first things the developers do in their game's description is to proudly announce that it has no in-app purchases. Because honestly, this does feel like a game that really could use more content. Small things like the ability to customize the appearances of your adventurers or a wider variety of character options such as more classes, races, or abilities really could have helped to make the game more enjoyable. The game definitely has some significant improvements over the previous 2 games in the series, but it also has just as many steps backwards when it comes to keeping the player properly engaged and interested in what's going on. Personally, I'd probably give it a slightly negative review overall. Maybe half a thumb down, so about a 4 out of 10. It's not necessarily a bad game, and I can certainly see it being popular with certain types of players, but if someone were to specifically ask me if I recommended it, I'd probably say no. I've sunk about 10 hours into the game so far, but I'm already starting to get pretty tired of it. And every time I boot it up, I just can't help but feel there are better things I could be doing with my time. That's not a good thing. It kind of defeats the purpose of playing a game in the first place. But if you're just looking for something to kill time with, or you just really love the art style or humor of the pen and paper series, then sure, it's probably worth the fairly modest price tag. But I do think that this is a game best enjoyed on a mobile platform, rather than a desktop PC. And for what it's worth, I might even reevaluate my overall opinion of the game, if they were to add more content. Galaxy of Pen and Paper is currently available for purchase on the Steam, GOG, and Humble Bundle platforms, retailing for about $15 US. It's also available for purchase as a mobile app for certain mobile devices, for the much more modest retail price of around $5 US. Now, if you'll excuse me, the Galaxy isn't going to save itself, so I guess I'll get back to grinding. This is RetconRaider, signing off. Thanks for listening. Oh, and remember, although I do enjoy talking about Galaxy of Pen and Paper, you can find out more about the game by visiting the official website or one of the store pages. Links are in the description.